I want to give you guys a quick breakdown of the most powerful trauma healing series I've ever read in my life, and that is No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz and Internal Family Systems. No Bad Parts is kind of like a short breakdown of the points in Internal Family Systems. And yeah, Internal Family Systems is his bigger, more structural book that gives a broader overview of the topic. Richard Schwartz was a pretty renowned family therapist. So he worked with different families and interpersonal family dynamics to kind of see what was going on in the family unit. He believed that for one client to heal themselves, the family unit had to change as a whole. So for example, he worked with a lot of bulimic clients, and family systems largely deal with, okay, maybe it's something to do with the father or the way the mother and the father are interacting, or how there's triangulation in the group. And over time, Richard Schwartz realized that a lot of the people he was working with, they couldn't be healed through this method. There was no real concise way of getting to the root of the problem. But he also noticed that a lot of the clients that he had, they seemed to have this recurring theme where, particularly his bulimic clients, they had this theme where they would talk about how one part of them wants this thing and another part of them wants another thing. And there would be kind of like this inner conflict that would ensue. And being so strongly rooted in the family healing model, basically, Schwartz kind of denied this. Like, he didn't really like the idea of it. He thought it sounded a little bit outlandish and ridiculous. But he kind of got to the point where it came up so much that he realized he had to actually start speaking to his clients' parts. He had to actually start out, even just for the sake of his own curiosity, like identifying these different parts in his clients and starting to get a better understanding of how these different parts of his clients worked. And as he did that, he started to notice that the inner selves of his clients were radically disparate. Like, one part would be over here doing this, another part would want that, and they would clash with one another. And the client, for example, would feel this insatiable desire to binge, followed by this like shame and guilt that would come with a purge, and then that purge would be followed by another part, and it would just kind of be this endless, what he calls like a cacophony, just all of these disparate parts fighting one another. And over the years, he developed internal family systems as a way to help clients restore wholeness in themselves by unifying their parts together through having a healthy sense of leadership and embodying what he calls self, which is sort of like the inner core, Schwartz believes. And when I first heard about this, I was like, I have to read the book, and I couldn't find the bigger book first, so I had to just get No Bad Parts first, and then I managed to find this one at our local library recently. And when I read the book, I immediately felt so drawn into it. I knew it's like something in my intuition clicked into it. And I read the book, and I did all of the exercises throughout the book, and I did actually have a couple of pretty powerful experiences myself. I have worked with some similar stuff before, so I already had some of an understanding of how to work with these systems, but never so directly. And now reading Internal Family Systems has been even more revealing. I would definitely recommend just going straight to Internal Family Systems if you're interested, if you're a clever person and you're looking to just get straight into it. No Bad Parts is more of a practical summary, but I like the way Internal Family Systems done is better. Now, the reason I feel like these books, this model is one of the most powerful models I've seen for dealing with trauma, the most powerful model I've seen, is because so many of the strategies that we often have for dealing with and coping with trauma, notice how so many of them attempt to sort of pave over these problems. Like, if we go see a psychiatrist, a lot of the time, they're gonna prescribe us medications, and I'm not poo-pooing medications or saying that they're bad in a final sense. but they're often just paving over the problem, or we might change some situations in our life, or we might work on our health. And all these things are great because they add something on top, and they put us in a more functional state in their own way, I'm sure. But deep down, these parts of us that are wounded, Schwartz points out that when these parts are exposed to trauma, they get frozen in that trauma response. So we can have parts deep down inside of us that don't actually feel like they're adults at all. They still feel like they're children inside, because they are. That part of us was frozen there, and it's had to keep us safe for so long. So that intense sense of needing to use drugs, or needing to binge, or needing to run away, or dissociating from our experience, it's not that we're bad people and that we have something wrong with us, or that there's some corrupted part of our soul or anything like that. It's more the fact that these parts of us can be frozen deep down inside, and that they feel the constant need to defend us. He breaks it down in the book by saying that there are different parts that are usually responsible for different things. There are critics, firefighters, managers, different parts inside of us that serve different roles and have had to defend us in different ways. And what I really love about internal family systems is it's not a model that is trying to get us to just be strong or push these things down or change anything about ourselves. No, it's actually teaching us very direct ways to get in touch with these parts of ourselves that we have, he calls them exiles. Parts of ourselves that we have exiled because it was too painful to handle that level of emotion. But he teaches us to slowly get in touch and start to talk to our manager parts inside of us that feel the need to overview everything we do and critique us. He shows us how to be aware of our firefighter parts that tend to just burst in to try put out the flames when situations go wrong, often by prompting us to use drugs or anything that's going to distract us from this awful emotion. Now, as for working with exiles, he does mention over and over again that you don't necessarily want to go straight into doing this yourself, and it's better to have an IFS certified therapist helping you walk through these parts, as getting in touch with these exiled parts of us can actually be pretty strong psychic happening. And it can be a quite strong experience. I've had experience working through some of these things now, getting in touch with a couple of these exiles, and one of them I cried for 30 minutes straight, for example. It sounds a bit outlandish, but I felt like I actually went back in time to my childhood home, and I said goodbye to my dog that I never got to say goodbye to in real life because I'd moved away from home when she died. But I felt like I got back in touch with her in that moment, and I was able to live through that difficulty, and I was able to give compassion to that part of myself that I didn't even know I didn't want to face it, for example. But yeah, if you're interested in a more holistic method, even if you're just interested in learning a little bit about this method, I recommend looking up Dr. Richard Schwartz on Spotify. That's what I did first, just to listen to a couple of his podcasts and hear him give a breakdown of his work and why he developed internal family systems and what it's been so useful for so many people. But if you really want to dive in, I couldn't recommend getting into these books more. I've noticed that at the nearest bookstore in the psychology section that he's got more books coming out now. I think there's about 3 or 4 more. And internal family systems is the apex that all of those other books center around, and the other smaller practical books are like offshoots of it. But it definitely took this a lot of time to get traction. So anyway, yeah, if you found this interesting or you got some value out of this, I appreciate you subscribing to the channel. Drop a like, share this with someone you feel like would get value out of it. And yeah, definitely check these out. I thought I'd share that. I hope you're having a beautiful day, and that's me.